What's up, everybody? It's Jake at jakecpunut.com, and all my videos reference back to my blog, my website, jakecpunut.com. You would think I would get on there and do some blog posts, wouldn't you? But I've been really slack on that because there's just been so much going on. It's been an unreal month of May, and if I ever find the time, or make the time, I will do some blog posts and let you know what all's been going on. But anyway, back to brewing finally. Trying to move away from the actually, I never did really do any canned kits other than the couple of Mr. Beer kits I did. Then I stepped up to some extract kits with specialty grains, and I need a beer. I feel like I need to relax, but I don't know why I already had one. But so now I'm doing a Brew in the Bag, BIAB kit. I got this kit from Austin Home Brew Supply. Had it about a week now, trying to get some other things accomplished before I could do this, but and I'll tell you about that later. But I'm slowly moving towards all grain, and as soon as I can get my mash tun and get me a 10-gallon brew pot and a burner, I'll be doing some all grain stuff and get away from the extracts. So this kit ought to be fun. Like I say, it's a little step up, so I'll show you what all came with it right quick. Got the base grains, 2 pounds 8 ounces of 2-row, 4 ounces of carapils, 4 ounces of crystal 40. So that's the base grains. Good looking stuff, smells good. 3 pounds of extra light dry malt extract. For the bittering hops, there's 1 ounce of cluster and 1 ounce of galena, I guess is the way you pronounce it. I've never used them, so we'll see how that goes. There are no flavoring hops in this kit, but for the aroma hops, there's another 1 ounce of cluster hops for the last 5 minutes for the aroma. By the way, these bittering hops are for 60 minutes in the boil. And then this recipe calls for dry hopping, so there's another 1 ounce of clusters that will be dry hopping in the secondary. So there's your ingredients. Oh, and of course the Nottingham yeast, which I bought an extra pack. I'm thinking about, I'm not going to rehydrate. I've read so much, and I know there's so much debate over every little thing you do with brewing, whether to rehydrate, whether not to rehydrate. If it's dry yeast, you don't need to rehydrate. Whether to make a starter, blah, blah, blah. But from what I understand, using dry yeast for ales like I'm using, there's no need to rehydrate. It does help. I think when you pitch it dry into your wort, it kills off some of the yeast cells, so I may just use like a half of the other pack and see how that does. But other than that, we have the nylon bag that we'll use for the mash, and that will, after I get my strike water in this pot, my 22 quart pot, I think the recipe calls for 2.5 gallons for the strike water. And I know there again, there's different methods people use for their strike water. Some people use like 1 1/4 quarts for a pound of grain, 1 1/2 quarts, and so forth and so on. But I'm just going to go by the recipe, since these guys should have it figured out, hopefully. So I'm just going to go by that. And I think, like I said, it calls for 2.5 gallons of strike water. I'll mash in that, and then my sparge water. The recipe calls for Misty's home, so the dog's going nuts. But the sparge water calls for heating up the water, to the desired temperature, and then pouring it over the grains. And I don't think my colander is big enough, my strainer, so I may do the tea bag method for 10 minutes or so. I'll decide on that when I get to it. But gonna get started. Gonna go get me a beer, and I'll tell you some other things as I go. Back in a minute. Alrighty, got step number 1 completed here. I heated my strike water up per the instructions to 160 degrees. I actually let it go like 2 degrees over. So I got it up to 162. Now we're shooting for a mash temperature of 155. So after I got it to 162, I put my grain bag in the kettle and dumped the grains and stirred them and took a temperature reading, and it was 154. So it was off 1 degree, but I'm thinking that's going to be perfect. That'll be fine. So it's got to sit for 45 minutes. and every 15 minutes I'm going to give it just a little bit of stir and check my temperature just to get an idea of how much the temperature is going down. So I have my strike water ready, and like I said, that's, oh Lord, 8 cups. Was it 8 cups, Misty? 6 cups, because it was 1.5 quarts is my strike water. So I'm supposed to pour that over my grains. It's obviously not deep enough to dip my grains in like I was thinking, but I think I have something downstairs that I can use instead of this strainer, because it's just not big enough. So I have something downstairs. It's kind of like a freezer rack that I'm going to try to set over top of this and just let it sit over it and just set the grains over it and pour, and I'm hoping that'll work without making a huge mess, but we'll see. Alright, we're counting down here. Got about 4 minutes left in the mash. My temperatures did drop probably about 8 degrees or so. There was a couple of times I heated up some water, like 2 cups, and put it in there to bring it back up a little bit. So I have to work on that. I know there's some headspace. Probably this 22 quart pot's only half full, so I know I've read different things about putting tin foil over it and letting that help hold the temperature in, but I have to work on that. I didn't know what to expect since this was my first brewing a bag, so you know, you learn. So I don't think it'll make a huge difference. It might make some difference in my efficiency, but anyway, like 3 minutes left, and in the mash, and I have my strike water at 170 degrees. Like I say, it's an oversized pot for that little bit of water, but the next thing I'll be doing, since my strainer's too small to go over the pot, what I decided to do was use this basket that comes from a freezer and just set the colander or the strainer, whatever, down in it, and I'll just set this whole thing over top of the kettle and put my grains in there and pour the sparge water over top of that for the last little bit. So check back with you in a little bit. Okay, just want to show you my little setup here, since my strainer wasn't big enough to fit over the mash pot. I just had this basket sitting downstairs, not using it, so I just set the strainer inside the basket and set the whole basket over the pot. And there's the grains, and I have my sparge water up to 107 degrees, so it's ready. And I will slowly pour that over this and rinse these grains the last little bit, and then put it back on for a boil. Alright, got the mash done, got the sparge water poured over the grains, rinsed them, and I have my wort getting ready to come back up to a boil. And I'm not going to go through probably the rest of this process, because it's all redundant. Everybody knows how to do all this stuff pretty much. But I never had done a brew in a bag, so I wanted to do that. From here, I'll just bring this up to a boil, remove it from the heat, add my dry malt extract, and start my boil again and do the hop thing. And you know, from there, everybody knows how to do it, or most people should. But anyway, the brew in the bag is really pretty simple. Learned a couple of things, so I'll probably do a few more, get those under my belt before I go to all grain, but I'll adjust here and there as needed. But remember, brewing the bag, there's a couple of different ways, or there's several different ways of doing it, but you know, I think it's the Australian method is a full boil, and obviously I don't have the equipment to do a full boil for 5 gallons right now, but so that's why I'm doing the partial boils. So a couple of different ways you can do it. I hope it turns out good. I hope my original gravity is close by, so we'll see how it turns out. Before I go, I do have another video to do that I'll show you after I get this all done and cleaned up and in the fermenter. I'll show you the goodies that I've bought. I've got me a chest freezer and a Johnson control for fermenting, but I'll show you all that in another video. So